Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 590, and today's date is February 12th, 2015, and the title of this episode is A US Government Central Bankers Trapped Will Use Ukraine Peace Deal for War. Let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Greece and Europe, they're still talking with each other, trying to work out the entire situation, and Europe understands that, hey, we have nothing to fall back on. If Greece decides to go with Russia or China, they have other alternatives. And we're stuck with this debt if they decide, hey, we're just not going to pay it back. We're just going to say, hey, you know what? We're done here. So Europe actually has to work with Greece if they want to keep them in the Eurozone, want to keep them in NATO, and want to work out some type of debt deal. So we see that Germany is starting to make some compromises. We see that Germany, the Greek officials, signal common ground on an aid deal. Germany said not to insist all parts of current bailout. Greece said to be open to surplus privatization debate. Europe is always about finding a compromise and working with other countries to help in every situation. Well, no, really, they're not. They are this central banking system. What they're doing is they're putting every single country into debt, and we realize from what has been going on in Greece, their system does not work. By continually giving them more and more debt, imposing austerity, making people lose their jobs, making people lose their businesses, making the youth of these countries not able to find any work, which is the next generation, the entire system falls apart. And this is proof that it does fall apart. And we see that in Europe and in the United States, all these debt-based systems, it is completely falling apart. It is not going to get any better. It's going to get worse because all they're doing is adding more and more debt. Take your own household. If you were making $50,000 a year and you had $200,000 worth of debt, and next year you had $300,000, then $400,000, but you're still making the same amount of money, can you survive? No, you cannot. It is impossible. And the same thing is happening in each one of these countries. The people are tapped out. They have no jobs. Very difficult to find a good paying job. Yes, there are jobs out there, but they're very low paying jobs. And a lot of people have to get 2-3 jobs, and they still can't bring in the money to support the house that they were in while they're working at the good job. And we can see that this is spreading all across the world. I mean, in Australia, the Reserve Bank of Australia cut their interest rates to a record low 2.25%. The official unemployment rate went from 6.1% to 6.4%. So we could see that this is starting to spread to other countries, and it will. As things start to fall apart, everything will start to accelerate, and other countries will start to feel the pain. The United States most likely will be the last of these countries because they're able to create the money. But we can see from certain different indicators that things are starting to fall apart, and we've been following these. Now, can I predict the future of when the collapse is actually going to happen? Absolutely not. Nobody can. But what we can do is we can look at every single indicator and put the entire story together to show us that, yes, something is about to happen. It's almost like when a storm is coming. People are out there, yes, a hurricane is coming, hurricane. Oh, I don't believe you. It's beautiful sunny out today. There's no hurricane. Yes, it could be 600-700 miles away. And it could change speeds. But eventually, it will arrive to that area. And for those people who didn't believe, they will be wiped out. Those people who are prepared with food, battery, and everything else, they will be okay. I mean, we saw this when in the north, when the Hurricane Sandy hit, there were people that were not prepared for this at all because they didn't believe the storm was going to be bad. And then there were those who had batteries, heating systems, generators. They were absolutely fine in their homes. The other people, no power, no heat, nothing. So we can see right now that we are looking at all of the economic indicators, putting the pieces together to tell a story, to understand that, yes, something is about to happen. If you go back from 2005 to 2007, and if you did the same thing at that time, you would put together a story that, yes, things were falling apart. Even though the Federal Reserve, the US government, and the corporate media was out there saying, no, everything is fine. You would have known that, yes, something is coming. When exactly, we don't know. But we see here in the United States that jobless claims have jumped back above 300,000. They jumped up around 24,000 to about 304,000, missing expectations. And of course, this was driven a lot by these shale states because their trend is higher right now, because as oil prices have come down, people have been losing their jobs left and right. And if we look at the global oil layoffs, they have exceeded 100,000 jobs. That is a lot of jobs. It's a lot of people without work. And of course, their expertise was in that industry. And where are you going to go to get another job? It's going to be very, very difficult. We see that Bank of America is laying off 250 people in their mortgage division in Charlotte, North Carolina. The question is, if housing is booming, why would you be laying off people in your mortgage division? It makes no sense. We've seen this before, and it's ongoing. We saw it back in August of 2013 when mortgage companies started to lay off thousands upon thousands of people. And it continued on, and it's still going on, where corporations, mortgage departments are still laying off people. Because why? The American people are tapped out. They just don't have the money to purchase their homes. We see that foreclosures have risen by 5% in January. The number of U.S. properties in foreclosures rose 5%, driven by a jump in bank repossessions. And this is coming from Realty Track. So we can see foreclosures are on the rise. People who are losing these jobs cannot pay for their houses, and as time goes on, they foreclose. This is what happens. We saw it happen in 2008. We see business inventories grow at the slowest pace since May of 2013. Business inventories grew at a mere 0.1% in December, missing expectations for the 7th of the 8 months past. This is the slowest inventory growth since May of 2013, like I said. Perhaps most worrisome is the drop in sales, down 1.1%, which slammed the inventory to sales ratio to its highest since July of 2009. Retail sales plunged twice as much as expected. And we know that the lower fuel prices did not push people to go out and spend their money. It just didn't happen. We called this back in October and November. We said absolutely not. People are not going to go out there with all their savings and start to purchase everything. So we can see that sales fell by 0.8%. They expected it only to fall by 0.4%, so it was actually double the percentage. And if we break it down to see where all the sales are being lost, we can see that it is happening in furniture and home stores. Now, if real estate is booming and there's new houses coming in and people are buying everything, why are sales down in furniture and home furniture stores by negative 0.7%? We also see that clothing and clothing accessories is down by negative 0.8%. Sporting goods, hobby, book, and music stores down negative 2.6%. Department stores down negative 0.7%. So when we look at all this, we see that, yeah, sales are really hurting. People are not going out and purchasing. They don't have the money. They're tapped out. As more and more people get laid off and more retail stores close, it makes it very difficult to save money. It makes it very difficult to have disposable income. And people live day to day. They pay their bills. They pay their rent, mortgage. They pay their cars. And most of the time they have nothing left over. Especially all these people that are on EBT cards, food stamps. They have no money left over. Believe me, most of the people don't want to be on EBT. They want to have a job. They want to work. They want to make money. They want to clothe their children. They want to go on vacation. They want to purchase goods and not feel scared or worried or be in fear that, God, how am I going to make next month's rent payment? How am I going to make next month's mortgage payment? Can the lights stay on? I don't know. I hope so. This is what America is worrying about right now. We see the Baltic Dry Index fell by 540 points. It fell another 13 points. I mean, it's continually just dropping. We're past the lowest point, which was back in August 1986. But what do we see? We see the United States out there, United States government central bankers making war everywhere they are. No peace, just war. Not making business deals to spur economic growth back in the United States, to bring manufacturing back. No, yeah, it's a lot of lip service, but guess what? It's not happening. Russia, on the other hand, China, on the other hand, they're out there. They're making deals. Russia and Nicaragua signed several bilateral agreements in defense sphere. They are making deals. They're working with each other. China is in Nicaragua making deals. And we can see this is continually happening. Non-stop. I mean, look, the United States government, the central bankers, they're trying to push their TTIP agreement throughout Europe. And everyone is against it because it only benefits the corporations. It does not benefit the people. And we see Greece is saying, listen, we're going to veto this thing. This will be a gift to the people. And this is why they can't get this moving, because everyone realizes, first of all, it's secret. Second of all, Congress can't read it. And the people aren't given the TTIP, so they really don't have any idea what it really entails. We're just getting leaks and dribs and drabs of it, and that information that comes to us, we realize, this is not for us. This is for them. This is why they bring in the illegals into the country. This is why Obama waited for after the elections to push his memorandum forward. Because it benefits the corporations. They have the ability now to hire these illegals without paying penalties to Obamacare. That's why they wanted them in here. That's it. Plus, eventually what's going to happen? The illegals get their work permits. They can get student loans. They'll eventually go on Obamacare. And we can see that this is ongoing throughout. Everything the government, everything the corporations are doing is to benefit them, and the people are just left out in the cold. We see the United States government central bankers, they're trying to control the flow of information. And we know this from Naomi Wolf's 10 Steps of Closing Down a Society. She did research. She looked at all different countries and saw this is how you close down a society. And we can see that they are trying to control the internet. The government right now wants to regulate the entire internet. And we can see that the FEC held a hearing on whether or not they should regulate political speech on blogs, websites, and YouTube videos. And that is the Federal Election Commission. And they held this hearing because they're trying to see if they can regulate, lock down the flow of information. They want to control it. Obama and the FCC are using net neutrality as an excuse to impose lots of new regulations on the internet activity. The FCC commissioner who is opposed to this plan, he recently sent out a tweet holding what he calls the President Obama's 332-page plan to regulate the internet. And what is this plan? Well, this plan is to control what is said on different blogs, different websites, on social media. The plan explicitly opens the door to billions of dollars in new taxes on broadband. These new taxes will mean higher prices for consumers and more hidden fees that they have to pay. And it will micromanage everything on the internet. And we knew this was coming. We've talked about this before. We already see that the internet is regulated in many other countries. I mean, look at Saudi Arabia. There was a blogger who was talking about Islam, and he was sentenced to 1,000 lashes for insulting Islam. They don't have free speech there, but you have to remember, in Paris, weren't they involved in the march? Same with Turkey, same with many other countries, but what they're doing right now is they're locking down free speech. They don't want people reporting what is going on. Just like in Canada, that whole lawsuit with the central bank is being hidden from the people. They don't want people to hear about it. It's not being spread around on the corporate media, and if you do see it on the internet, it's quickly taken down. The central bankers want control. They have control of the creation of money, they have control of the corporate media, and they want control of the internet because it is the Wild West of information, and they need to stop it. This way they can control the story of what is going on, to make people believe and to be afraid of what is happening in this world. Now, a judge in California, a California district judge, ruled on Tuesday, U.S. citizens cannot sue the National Security Agency for invading their privacy covertly unless the citizen can prove without a doubt the NSA was spying secretly on the citizen. Well, isn't that why you sue someone, to prove that they were doing this? And this makes it very difficult to show that they've been spying, because what you have to do is get all the information. They'll look at it and say, oh no, you can't sue. Instead of going in front of a jury and having people decide that, yes, they were in the wrong. So all these corrupt judges that are controlled by the NSA, who have something on them, because, again, as we know, the NSA spies on all the people, judges, government officials, and they find dirt on them. And they use this dirt later to blackmail them into doing what they want. And we can see this is exactly what is going on right now. We see also that the government wants to do away with encryption. And we have to remember, and a lot of people say, well, what's the difference? I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, let me ask you, do you lock your house up? Do you keep important papers in a safe or someplace secure? Well, if you're not doing anything wrong, why do you do that? To protect it. Well, your conversations are your private conversations, and you should be allowed to protect it. If you sent a letter to a family member, or you sent investment information to someone, would you want the government to look at it and take your information? Or if you have a patent information, take it and patent something before you do? It's your private information, so you should have the right to secure it, just like you secure everything in your home. And what about criminals out there? I mean, let's forget about the government for a second. If you do not encrypt, your information can be stolen at any time. So it looks like we need encryption. And it doesn't matter, and everyone likes to say, well, it's computers. No, it doesn't matter what form of media. It doesn't matter if it's hard-coded on paper or if it's electronic. It's still the same information. It's just the way it's being delivered. I mean, if you give someone important papers, you're hoping that person who's going to deliver it, it's going to be secure. They lock it up in their car, they bring it into the bank or wherever they're going to go, or to a lawyer's office, and that information has to be secure. If you send it over the wire and it's not encrypted, it is not secure and somebody can get it. So these arguments are absolutely ridiculous. You have the right to lock down your personal information. But the government wants to do away with this. Why? Because they cannot spy on you. if it's encrypted. If they don't know the method, if they don't have the key, it's a problem for them. This is why they had to go to every single company and get the back doors. This is why they needed the cooperation of all these companies, Google, Yahoo, Facebook, and many others, because otherwise they couldn't spy on everybody. And this is why they're fighting so hard to stop encryption. And we have to be very careful with encryption, because the government encryption, they already know the method so they can get the key. We have to do personal encryption. This is what they're against. Personal encryption where they don't have the method and they can't figure out the key. It would be too difficult. And this is why they're so against it. Now in Ukraine, we see all the officials went to the early morning hours in hammering out a peace deal. And we see that it is a peace deal. It is written on paper, which is really meaningless unless everyone follows it. But when we look at the peace deal, we see that there are certain provisions in there. And it says the ceasefire will start February 15th, midnight, Saturday to Sunday in Kiev. Accord sets amnesty covering conflict in Donetsk, Lugansk regions. Accord sets a minimum of a 50-kilometer buffer zone, 70 to 140 kilometer for missile systems. Withdrawal set from the front line as of September 19th for rebels. Current front line for Ukraine Army. Ukraine to pass constitutional reforms, including permanent special status to Donetsk, Lugansk by end of 2015. Ukraine to restore economic ties, banking links, pensions, social benefits to East. Withdrawal of heavy artillery to start no later than second day after ceasefire starts. To be completed in 14 days. Agree to create oversight mechanism to ensure peace accord is implemented. Agree to support three-way talks with Ukraine, Russia, EU on gas supplies. Finally, as a reminder, this is the second time for a peace deal in Minsk, and Ukraine didn't follow the first one. Do you really think they're going to follow the second one? Do you really think the central bankers are going to say, okay, we have peace? I really don't think so. Let's go over the Minsk ceasefire deal point by point. The OSCE will monitor the safety zone. Now, we've seen this before, and they have been out there saying, yes, Ukraine fired these missiles. Yes, Ukraine pretty much violated the ceasefire. I don't see that really helping, but okay, it's in there. The OSCE will use its drone fleet and monitors on the ground, as well as satellite images and radar data to ensure that both parties stick to the deal. Well, we've seen this before, and it actually didn't work. Kiev and the rebels will negotiate the terms for future local elections in the rebel-held areas, which would bring them back into Ukraine's legal framework. Kiev would adopt legislation on self-governance that would be acceptable for the self-proclaimed republics. Kiev will declare a general amnesty for the rebels. An exchange of all prisoners must be completed by the 5th day after full disengagement. Humanitarian aid convoys will be allowed full access to the needy in the war-affected areas. After the local elections are held in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions, Kiev is to restore control over their borders with Russia. The transition may take time, which would be needed for a comprehensive constitutional reform in Ukraine. Kiev will implement comprehensive constitutional reforms by the end of the year, which would decentralize the Ukrainian political system and give privileges to Donetsk and Lugansk. The privileges include language self-determination, the freedom to appoint prosecutors and judges, and to establish economic ties with Russia. Now, a lot of this was all part of the first Minsk deal, which they really didn't agree upon and they didn't really want to follow. Now, during all of this, we see that Standard & Poor's decided to slash Russia's credit to junk. Very strange time to do this during a peace deal negotiation in Minsk. And at this point, we see that countries are out there saying, listen, there's no reason to send Ukraine weapons. Bosnia said, yeah, we don't need to send weapons to Ukraine at this point. Poland is out there, and they're saying the issue of arms supplies does not exist now, as in 2 days ceasefire will come into force in Ukraine. So we can see right now all the countries are starting to back off. The question is, what's going to happen with the central bankers? Because we have to remember, a lot of the key officials in Ukraine right now are bankers. Yatsenyuk is a banker, and Poroshenko works for them. They are in debt. Basically, what did they get out of this, I should say, ceasefire deal? It's really not peace just yet. It's just a ceasefire. What did they get out of it? They still don't have the southeastern region. They don't have Crimea. They still have the west portion of Ukraine. So they didn't get much, did they? Right now, Ukrainian specialists have not observed any military activity on the part of the Russian army units in the course of an inspection that was held in the southern Rostov region. He said the ministry had complied with the provisions of the 2011 Vienna document and had ensured inspection on areas of about 15,000 square kilometers that had been selected by the Ukrainian side, and there are no Russian troops or anything. Nothing there. And we knew this was the case. We knew Russia wasn't in there because let me tell you, if Russia was in there, like I said before, the satellite images would be plastered all over the place, and these would be the beautiful colored 3D showing us the insignia of Russia on all the tanks, on all the men. And again, with all this propaganda, there'd be about 100,000 soldiers now in Russia at this point in time. Now, the IMF is going to bail out Ukraine. The International Monetary Fund announced that they're going to bail them out with about $17.5 billion loan for Ukraine, which will bring the total about to $40 billion. So they're just receiving debt, debt, debt. And they have no economic revenue to pay this debt without the southeastern region. There is a problem with this. And we can see that as time goes on, the country is going to slide further and further into a collapse that they will not be able to get out of. And they know this. They understand this. Ukrainian politicians reacted to the ceasefire news with restraint. Poroshenko did his best in Minsk, but the deal appears shaky, a Ukrainian lawmaker and former commander said. We must remember that we are dealing with terrorists who violated all the previous ceasefire agreements many times. This is the way they see it. They have been fed propaganda. And a lot of these government officials there, again, have dual citizenship, where they've been placed in there to support the central banking system. And they are not happy whatsoever. Poroshenko was out there and has flatly rejected the idea of granting a broad autonomy to the eastern Donbass region and of making Ukraine a federation. Ukraine was, is, and will remain a unitary state. Federalization is not an option. Poroshenko wrote this on his Facebook in the immediate wake of the four-sided talks on ending the year-long conflict. So right after the talks, he went on the Facebook and said, I do not agree with this. This is not happening. So basically, they put the ceasefire in place. They realized they were losing the battle in Ukraine. They were not going to win. The Ukrainian troops were not ready to fight. They had no stomach to fight. And this is why they were drafting all of these men and women. And this is why they placed the laws into effect. If you try to desert, you will be shot. You'll be put in prison. Because they realized the people were not for it. During the peace talks, we have the U.S. in Ukraine still training Ukrainian armed forces. Still trying to pass legislation to have lethal weapons brought into Ukraine. Poroshenko is out there and he's saying the European Union should continue putting pressure on Russia so as to achieve fulfillment of the Minsk Accords. Well, let's get this straight. Putin came up with the Minsk Agreement for a ceasefire. It was put into place. Poroshenko met with Putin, and then Ukraine decided, all right, we think it's time to go to war. So they destroyed a bus terminal. They hit civilian areas. They went after the airport, and they were driven back. And as their armed forces were being surrounded and captured, and they realized this was a no-win situation, they said, okay, let's have peace, because we are not ready. We need the U.S. in here to help us. So they went again for peace. And if you look at this, Washington was not in these peace deals. UK was not in these peace deals. So right now, they don't have to abide by it. They can tell their central banking people, we want war, and this is exactly what's going to happen. Kerry says they are prepared to roll back sanctions on Russia if they follow the Minsk agreements. You mean the peace deals, the ceasefire deal put together by Putin? You can tell this is a complete setup. You can tell where this is going. The United States was not involved in the peace process. They were not involved whatsoever. It was Poroshenko and Putin. And of course, Merkel and Hollande, they were there also. But it's easy for them to say, Russia violated the ceasefire. If you notice, this is what they've been using all along. They are setting them up. When I say them, they're setting Russia up. They're getting ready to blame Russia for something. And most likely they will use some type of false flag to show that, yes, the southeastern people, along with Russia, they attacked first, and the Minsk agreement is completely off. They violated it. This is how it works. Already, Poroshenko is out there making changes to the agreement. This is done over and over and over again in every deal, because they don't want peace. Now, of course, they're going to give a lot of lip service saying, yes, we do want peace. But again, it is lip service. We need to look at their actions and what they are doing. I mean, the United States is out there says the Minsk agreement is an important move toward peace in Ukraine. Well, if it's so important, why didn't the United States come up with a peace deal? And they urge all parties to carry out their commitments under the new agreement. This is coming from a White House, which they said in a statement issued on Thursday. All sides to carry out their commitments. Already, they're showing you that they're going to say, the southeastern people, they didn't follow along on their commitment. Russia did not follow along on the commitment. That's all they have to say. And all they need is a small little false flag event, just like they tried to do this last go around, where they bombed civilians in a trolley, in a bus, and they said it was the southeastern people. It makes no sense for them to bomb their own people. But an outside country trying to take over a country, it makes perfect sense to go ahead and bomb the civilians. We see it in Syria. We see it in the Middle East. They don't care as long as they get their way. Now, there are U.S. government officials who are commenting on the peace deal, the ceasefire deal in Minsk. And they're not talking about peace. They're actually talking about how it's not going to work and we're going to be back in war. John McCain is out there. He says, it sounds to me like it's unenforceable. It's a Band-Aid, and my predictions to you, it will not last a week. They don't want it to last. They're going to do everything in their power to push war in this region. They realize and they understand that they need this war. And this is why President Obama is going after the authorization of war for Syria. I mean the Islamic State. But we know it's really to get into Syria, then eventually into Iran. And they're hoping that Russia gets involved with China. This is what they're trying to do. Bull Craig Roberts was out there. And he's saying the Minsk deal is not actually real. And it's basically saying that, yes, there is a ceasefire, but what's going to happen is the United States is going to use this to push war. Washington was not even a partner to the Minsk peace deal. How can there be peace when Washington has made policy decisions to escalate the conflict and to use the conflict as a proxy war between U.S. and Russia? I mean, United States says they're not involved, but we have the Ukrainian Freedom Act. We have U.S. soldiers in Ukraine training others, and they're also involved in battle. We're bringing in aid, lethal weapons, and Washington was not in these peace talks whatsoever. They didn't even want to, they should have invited themselves, saying, hey, we want to be involved. We want peace in here. But they left themselves out of it because they knew they wanted war. I mean, really look at it. They're sending lethal aid. They're sending weapons. They're passing new legislation which allows foreign countries to send weapons via the United States into Ukraine, since Obama can't make up his mind right now if he should send lethal weapons. Because Angela Merkel met with him and he couldn't come out and say, oh, you're talking peace? Well, we just want war. Let's bring in the weapons. No, he had to go along with it. So the only way to do this and the only way to get weapons in there and have the U.S. supply them is to make it look like the situation has gotten a lot worse, where the southeastern people in Russia have actually attacked. And the only way to do this right now is with a false flag, because as we can see from the actions of Putin, he's trying to continually push peace. This is the second time with the same Minsk deal. And again, the only way to do it is to make the entire region look like it's under threat from the southeastern people and from Russia. And this is why they are getting ready to do something huge in this area. And they will not stop until they have war. I mean, look around the world and see what's happening here. All they're doing is pushing war. They're not pushing peace. They are using proxy armies in every location to do their bidding. The Ukrainian armed forces is their proxy army. The Islamic State is their proxy army. Al-Qaeda is their proxy army. The Free Syrian Army is their proxy army for war. This is what they are doing. And we understand out in the Middle East that, yeah, things are falling apart. The people have taken over Yemen. The government has fallen. The United States government, central bankers, UK, France, they realize this. This is why they're evacuating their embassies and closing them. You don't do this if you have control of the country. They're doing it because they realize we do not have control of this country anymore. And this is why they had to pull people out. The same thing happened in Iran. When the people rose up and took back their countries from the U.S. government central bankers, they evacuated the embassy. In Libya, when the people rose up and took back their country, they evacuated the embassy. The same thing is occurring in all of these areas. And right now, the people in Yemen have taken over their country. But of course, the corporate media is playing it up that it's al-Qaeda and it's the worst branch of al-Qaeda that's in Yemen that just took over the embassy. They stole tanks, they sold armored vehicles and weapons. It's not the people. It's al-Qaeda. No, it's the people. This is what they use as an excuse. Anyone who is not going along with the puppet government, and you can see this is quite evident in Ukraine, they call those people terrorists. In the Middle East, they call them al-Qaeda. Now they're changing the name to Islamic State because no one was really scared of al-Qaeda anymore, so they had to make up a new one. Islamic State. So wherever the Islamic State is, that's where the United States government central bankers are going to go. This is what they're getting ready for. So we see the worst branch of Al-Qaeda is in Yemen. The Islamic State right now is advancing in Libya. And we can see right now they are getting ready to maneuver the forces into all of these areas. There's going to be thousands upon thousands of U.S. armed forces in each one of these countries. They're going to ramp it up very slowly, but eventually it's going to go full force. Now it looks like Obama has presented the authorization for war. And it seems that lawmakers of both political parties say Congress is likely to authorize further U.S. military actions against the Islamic State. The state consensus in both houses that the Islamic State is a threat, and the United States needs to take the significant steps of military action to combat that threat. This is what they've been building up all this time, to convince everyone that the Islamic State is a threat. This is why they've been doing this for the past year. They've been building up the story. Again, it's just a story. This is all made up to convince the world, other government officials who don't do any type of research to see what is really going on, to put them into fear, and they react. And they react the way the central bankers want them to react. Obama even says that, we could send U.S. Special Forces in there to kill the Islamic State leaders. Well, I'm going to tell you, once they send these Special Forces in there, they're not going after the Islamic State leaders. They're going after Assad in Syria. They're going to go after the leaders in Iran. And you can see how they're molding this story and pushing their agenda. Remember when Obama said there was going to be no boots on the ground? Boy, has this changed. And if we really look at this, Obama is seeking a blank check for perpetual war. In an attempt to delude the American public, which is overwhelmingly opposed to war, the new operations are to be limited in scope. The authorization states that it does not provide for enduring offensive ground combat operations. Again, the wording is formulated so as to allow virtually any type of military action. There is no definition of enduring or offensive. And this is, the definition from the government. Extended combat cooperation in Iraq, Syria, or another country could be justified on the grounds that they were defensive or not enduring. So you can see how they're going to use wordplay to make their case. And the big question is, did Obama just declare war on Syria? This resolution grants the authority to fight not only the Islamic State, but also so-called associated forces. The question is, what or who exactly are the associated forces? Considering the fact that this resolution will grant you the authority to wage war inside Syria without the consent of the Syrian government, international law states that they have the right of self-defense. And they're counting on this. If we look at international law, Chapter 7, Article 51 of the UN Charter, which states, "Nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of collective or individual self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations." And so the Syrian government will be well within its legal rights to defend with military force against U.S. aggression, be it from ground forces, aerial bombardment, etc. They want this to happen because they're going to be pushing into Syria. And eventually, once we find out who the associated forces are, because they are continually telling us that Assad is a terrorist, he's a dictator, he should not be in power, and this has been their main goal since the beginning. Now, since Congress is going to be voting on the authorization of war, they're continually using the propaganda and putting out the story that the Islamic State is everywhere. There's lone wolves everywhere in the country. We know exactly where they are. We're just not going to arrest them. We know that 20,000 people are joining up with the Islamic State. We know exactly who they are, where they're going, but we're not going to do anything about it. Think about it. How would they know this? Who would come out and say, listen, yes, I'm going to the Islamic State. I'll be going there. No. Everyone would keep it a secret. This is all propaganda. They're using the propaganda that the Islamic State insurgents took control on Thursday of most of the western Iraqi towns, threatening an airbase where U.S. Marines are training. Pretty soon they're going to be coming under fire. Pretty soon those Marines will be firing back if Congress doesn't vote for the authorization of war. They're going to continually push this until they get what they want. They will use propaganda. They will use events. They will use anything they possibly can. And eventually, to get the war started, once they have everything in place out in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe, as you can see they are doing right at this time, they will use an event to really ramp up this war. And that event will be here in the United States, most likely Europe, UK, where they say Russia, China, the Islamic State attacked the United States, brought down the financial systems like the stock market, the banking system, destroyed the economy. The cyber attacks hit the power grid, and they brought the U.S. to its knees. They want this to happen. They want the people to be scared. They want the people to say, we need to go get China. We need to go get Russia. We need to go get the Islamic State, and we need to put more people on the ground. We need to go to war. This is what they're trying to build up right now. This is what they're trying to push. All because they know the entire economy of the private Western central bank system is collapsing. And they want to cover it up. And the only way to do this is with war. This is all they know. It will not stop the collapse, but it's much easier to blame somebody else for it. And this is what they're doing. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.